as you can see here, even the previous story we just read, the first suggestion was, well, maybe you should just break up with your boyfriend and move on. And that's exactly the problem that we kind of experience. I definitely, motherhood has ruined my life. I always want to say, you have ruined your life. It is not the act of becoming a mother that ruined your life. It is the choices that you made in response to that. Today is going to be a pretty dark episode. We will venture into the regretful parents subreddit, which is filled with stories of people who think that they should not have become parents. It's one of the most challenging subreddits for me to read as a new parent, but I think that there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from it. So that's what we're doing today. Our first one is titled, I Dread the Weekends. I have an almost 4-year-old who absolutely adores his mom and doesn't give a about me. I get 0 hugs, kisses, or I love yous. This has created a ton of resentment from me that my wife, his mom, is tired of hearing about. I've noticed that for the past 6 months, I get super depressed on Thursday nights. I enjoy working later Friday afternoons and take my time going to be with the kiddo and wifey. Most people I work with check out around 3 or 4 p.m. Even though I work from home, I kept my office door closed until almost 7 p.m. last Friday. I was literally just organizing my desktop icons. Saturday, I can't stand Saturdays. What the F do I do with this kid all day? Me, hey bud, I'll take you to the zoo today. Him, no, I want mama to do it. Me, can I do it? I'd love to spend time with you. Him, no, mama. F you, dude. Library, zoo, library, zoo, library, zoo. Every Saturday is the same stuff. Maybe I'll luck out and have another kid's birthday party to go to. That will entertain him and give me some adults to chat with. Saturday night, let's do pizza and watch some crappy Disney movie. Sunday, I never thought I'd say this, but thank God I have to work the next day. I can pretend to be happy for just one more day. Donuts, pancakes, and a trip to the park will do the trick, I guess. What else? What else? Library or zoo? Let's order takeout for Sunday night because picking it up gives us something to do for 15 minutes. Gotta kill time to end this day. Thank God it's Monday morning. It's 7:45 a.m. and we are at school. See ya. Now, what's kind of sad about this one, or at least I guess maybe in some ways it's good. It's a good thing. He doesn't actually regret being a parent. He's just struggling to connect to his 4-year-old child. And I say just struggling, like, I don't mean to diminish that as a struggle. I can understand why that would be hard and why that would cause some resentment. But at the very least, he's not saying, you know, it would be better if my kid did not exist, which the others here kind of tend to go for. So in general, I think that there are always kind of ebbs and flows in terms of how kids relate to a particular parental figure at different ages. And so there are, you know, generally speaking, a lot of people will assume that kids when they're very young are going to tend to prefer their mothers more. And then as they get older, especially if they're sons, for example, they're going to start having a little bit more in common with their dad. And it's going to be more possible to do different activities with them and so on. And so what seems to be really unfortunate here is that the dad himself is also really quite resentful. And I can bet you anything that the kid picks up on it. So I think we as adults tend to assume that kids are a lot more dumb than they actually are. They're very astute and they're especially they have a very high emotional intelligence is how I would call it, in the sense that they can feel the energy in the room. They can tell if adults don't want to spend time with them. They have a different way of picking up on, you know, if people are arguing and not being open about it, if someone's angry and not saying anything, they definitely notice. So I'm pretty certain that the kid here has gotten the sense that his dad dreads spending time with him, and especially dreads the weekends because of the fact that he has to spend time with him. And so is it shocking that the kid doesn't want to spend more time with him? Probably not. So there is definitely a question here of like, where's the chicken? Who's the chicken? Who's the egg? And which one came first? Because to a large extent, I would probably guess that they're making it worse for each other. The less the dad wants to spend time with him, the less the kid wants to spend time with him. And then that makes it even worse because the dad is like, oh my God. And so it spirals out of control. I think, honestly, the core solution would be in looking for different activities that you can invest in, things that you can do with the kid, that you can spend time doing together. Ideally, if the mother actually leaves, so she's not even available, it's not a choice between mom or dad, but only dad is available if you want to play a particular game together. And then it's really just a question of working on this sense of resentment that you have yourself and trying to approach it from a completely different angle and completely different perspective from the kid's side of things, so that instead of being angry or frustrated or putting a lot of hope into it and being like, okay, this is going to be the thing that works, and then getting crushed and disappointed if it doesn't, that you are a little bit more laid back, a little bit less stressed out, that you're in a good mood, you're calm, you're happy. And you can start by doing things like you find some really exciting activity that you start playing with yourself, and you just do it in public so the kid can see you. You tell the kid, hey, if you want to come play with me, but you leave it open to the child, and you give him a little bit of time and space to decide that he wants to engage rather than pushing him into it. That's how I would approach it. I think that it sucks when this happens, and honestly, I find it kind of a shame that the wife is not on his side and not looking for solutions as well, because it's essential from my perspective as a parent that a child develops good relationships with both parental figures in their life. I don't think that it's very good to have such a heavy preference for one parent that, for example, he'll only listen to one over the other, and so on. So yeah, I that's how I would approach this one. I'm going to read out one of the comments here, which I appreciate. This one says, sounds like mama needs to go somewhere overnight, so she's not available. If he complains, just tell him that mama's not here, but you're going to build a pillow fort and he's welcome to join you if he wants to. Let him sit and stew in his own juices if he wants, and just act like you're having fun, whether he joins you or not. It'll take some time and effort on your part, but he'll come around. And watch the attitude. He can probably tell you don't want to be around him, so obviously he'll want to be with the parent who connects more with him. And I really like this as an answer, because it both gives a potential solution, like something that you can do, and makes it clear that the way that you interact with your kids really impacts them, like really influences them. You cannot lie to your kids without them knowing. One other comment that I thought was really interesting, this person says, is this not common too for kids to have that phase? They switch favorites. I remember I went back and forth, and when I was 3, I told my mom I was going to marry my dad. I'm wondering how long this has lasted, the preference. It is kind of nice though to see OP seems to be more frustrated about the favoritism versus just the concept of spending time with his kid or burnout. This is the first time I've seen this kind of issue posted here. And OP replies to this and says, it's lasted since he was born. Kiddo has never shown an interest in me and has always preferred mum. And another person replies, honestly, that can't possibly be deliberate or his fault. Babies don't know anything when they're born. So if he's been that way since he was born, you need to figure out what you're doing that's making him avoid you. That's if you want things to change. He knows that you're not that cool with him. And I really, really, really like this as a comment, because honestly, with parenting, it's always really hard to find the right balance between how much responsibility should I take for this versus how much is, for example, my kids' responsibility. And obviously when they're children, and especially when they're very young, it's a 4-year-old, then they cannot take on very much responsibility. One of the later stories we're going to read is about an adult man. And obviously when someone's an adult, then you have much more of this, okay, how much responsibility really is theirs? But it's tempting as a parent to be like, well, you know what, I'm doing my best, and parenting is hard and raising kids is hard. And of course, it's difficult, and I make mistakes because I'm only human and I'm not infallible. And I think we try to get into this habit where it's difficult to find the right angle, to not be too self-flagellating about it, but to still take enough ownership and responsibility of your actions as a parent and what you're doing. So I really like this statement of, okay, you know what, if he's only 4 years old and he's always had this preference, then that means that there's something about the way you're interacting with him that's causing this. And a lot of people will say that dads, especially when it comes to newborns, that dads have a much harder time connecting with a newborn because, they're really small, they're really fragile, they don't breastfeed. That's one of the biological differences between men and women to a large extent. But honestly, it really comes down a lot to the amount of time that you spend with them, what you spend that time doing, how you interact with them, how you engage with them. And that's kind of your responsibility as a dad to figure out. One final comment that I thought was really, really useful. This person said, hey, you have a lot of comments already, so I'm not sure if this will be seen or not. I've worked with foster kids before, and there's a lot of pushback from them with good reason. I was taught a neat trick for bonding, which you could try the next time kiddo and mom are playing. with cars or action figures or Legos or whatever, sit down with them and narrate what the kid is doing. You're building a bridge. Nice. That car's going through the bridge now. Is it going to make it? Phew, it made it. Oh, a blue car now, stuck behind the yellow car. Another caboose on the train. Will the train be able to move? There it goes. It fell over. What now? Gotta add more track here. They connect. You made a full track. It's boring at first, but the kids do love it and it's easy to do. Good luck. And so I just appreciated that as a simple tip that someone could implement if they're really struggling to connect, especially with kids when they're younger. I think most of the ways that people recommend to talk to kids, which are often, this kind of narration style, help a lot because kids don't quite have the same perception or the same understanding of things that we do. And so helping them articulate what's going on as they see it, it works very much the same way with emotions as well. If you help them articulate their emotions, then they feel like it's much more of a learning experience for them as well. So yeah, hopefully this is a fixable one, and I hope OP does manage to find a way to connect with his 4-year-old. The next one, won the lottery but still regretful. I don't know what I'm looking for. Just a vent, advice, both. Backstory is my boyfriend and I were on-off for the span of 2 years. Things got ugly at some point, but nevertheless, we just kept getting back together. Our last breakup back in 2021, we started actively seeing other people, and we're both starting to move on. We had one last hurrah and got stuck together for a week due to an unforeseen ice storm. Despite being on birth control and taking a plan B just to be safe, I found out I was pregnant a month later. Nobody tells you that getting an abortion requires a certain level of inner strength that I just didn't have at the time. No one's fault but my own. I told him and he has stepped up to the plate in every way and was at every appointment, helped with all my postpartum needs and let me lash out, not realizing that it was postpartum depression that was making me so angry. I feel like I disassociated through the whole 9 months trying to pretend like it wasn't happening to keep from freaking out. Anywho, fast forward to now, my daughter is 15 months old, sleeps mostly through the night, and is for the most part an easy baby to take care of. My partner helps with most of the housework and the baby when he gets off work. Despite all this though, I'm just feeling so angry and upset about all of it. I'm a stay-at-home mom because we can't afford childcare. I had to drop community college because we can't afford the classes, and I look at all my peers finishing school, getting ahead in their careers, moving cities, and just living their best life. I've got a great partner and he's really stepped up, but I know deep down we're only together because we're trying to do right by our child. He talks of marriage and I just feel so guilty because I know my heart isn't in it, but I don't know how to say that without causing a mountain of problems. And financially, I'm in no position to go anywhere if he were to leave because I told him I don't want to be married. I just don't have the same feelings I did when we first started dating because of all the back and forth that happened. I love my daughter, but I look at her and feel so much resentment because I know things would be different if she wasn't here. And I feel guilty for feeling that way because ultimately it isn't her fault. She didn't ask to be here. I'm 24 and I feel like I'm rotting away being someone's caretaker day in and day out instead of the self-discovery your 20s were meant for. I just wish I could go back in time and have the abortion and not feel like I'm stuck because I'm looking out for the well-being of myself and my child. Now, this one is pretty heavy. I really struggle with this one on quite a lot of levels. I kind of understand to some extent this idea that, hey, at 24 years old, I'm still very young. I have my whole life ahead of me. That your 20s are made for as a period of self-discovery and you should be focusing on yourself. Now, what I think the problem is I really do believe that this is a lie that has been sold to us and to a very, very small minority of us, actually, in the West. 24 years old is old enough in the vast majority of places in the world today to have a fully grown family. And not only today, but throughout all of history, actually, but by 24 years old, you 100% a fully fledged adult. And what I think we've gotten into is this habit and this belief that as people living today, our 20s are this period of self-discovery. And the question really is, what does self-discovery mean for the majority of people? And as far as I can tell, self-discovery for most people seems to be like have zero responsibilities, party a lot, get drunk, spend time clubbing, have lots of sex, especially casual sex with no strings attached. And I don't quite understand what the gain of all of this is. I don't understand why people perceive that as the equivalent of having lots of fun, living your life to the fullest in your 20s. Now, OP, I say this, I understand that OP is missing out on other things that are also important to her, things like community college, her education, her job. Like these are the big sticking points for her. Now, I very firmly believe that there's a lot that you can do as a couple. There's way more, by the way, that you can do as a couple versus as an individual, so as a single parent, to try and set your life up in such a way that you are able to get your education, that you're able to go back to work, that you can eventually afford childcare. What is often the case in these types of situations is that people assume that this stage of life with their child is forever. And I don't know why they assume that, to be honest. Like the difference between having a 15-month-old and a 1 or 2 or 3-month-old is huge already. And then if you imagine the difference between having a 3-year-old and having a 15-month-old is also very, very big. So in general, there's not a lot that I wouldn't be able to get through if I knew that there is an end date at the end of it. If I was really struggling with my life, I was really unhappy about the place that I'm in, then I would be like, okay, why am I here? What can I do to change my circumstances? And I truly do not believe that this idea of being a caretaker day in and day out, I don't think that being a stay-at-home mom prevents you from being able to do anything else with your time. And maybe this is just an assumption from my side, but especially if you have a partner who's really involved, and she says like he's super, super involved, that he's really stepped up in every way, I cannot imagine that it's not possible for her to have an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day, if need be, where she does something else, whether that's college, whether it's online classes, whether it's some kind of job, a part-time job, whether she tries to find a way to work from home. Like there are all these options that are available for you both to have an income, to give yourself a different set of things that you do on a daily basis, right? That you're not spending all of your time focused on the child and dealing with the frustration of that because you don't get any adult engagement or enjoyment. Find books that you can read, find a different way to educate yourself. You know, you have the internet today. You have so many resources available to you and so much information available to you. And instead what happens is that people end up in this position where they're like, oh my God, I just don't have anything that I could be doing. And then instead of thinking, I'm in this situation now, but I have all of the possibilities to try and change it if I really sit down and I really focus on it and I really work with my partner on it, then I will find a way. So instead of thinking that, or instead of also thinking, I'm making a short-term sacrifice for the next year, 2 years, even 3 years, until our circumstances change and my child is old enough that they can move on, the focus is always on this aspect of regret, where you're like, if only I could go back in time and have an abortion. And that's really dark. That's kind of evil in some ways. So because if I had a sense of regret that I had a child, then I would be thinking back in time and be like, if only I had never gotten pregnant. If only that one decision, this last hurrah that I decided to have with my boyfriend, who was an on-off boyfriend when I wasn't happy with the relationship and I wanted to move on with my life, if only I had just made a different decision then. That to me changes the dynamic here dramatically, because then instead of thinking, if only I had had an abortion, if only my child didn't exist, I would wish, okay, maybe I could have changed how I acted so that my child never actually came into existence to begin with. Which still sucks, don't get me wrong. Looking at your kid at any point and being like, man, I hope you didn't exist. Like that's a pretty dark wish. That's why the Regretful Parents subreddit is a dark place to hang out. But it's very different to me. Maybe it's just to me. So yes, that's how I feel about this one. One of the comments that I'll also read out here is from OP, but I'll read some backstory to it as well. This person says, is it not an option to sit him down and say, I care about you, I appreciate you, but I don't romantically love you. We should start to separate and co-parent. This way you can both have time off and you're free to pursue a partner who you are in love with. Otherwise, I'm sure the child will pick up on the resentment and so will he. You both should be set free to seek other people if that's what you want. I know it's easier said than done, but I think you should really sit down and consider it. And then OP replies, I have considered that, but I fear that I would only leave me and my daughter homeless. At the very least, myself and I I'd have to leave my daughter behind. I haven't had the best luck at finding either a work from home or overnight job so that I can start collecting some income. And I don't think he'd want to live together for much longer after that, understandably so. It's not so much wanting to see other people, but just wanting to be free to be myself. And this is where I think you can really see the cracks of how we deal with these types of problems on a societal level. So the first set of advice she gets is you should break up with your boyfriend because what you're doing is unfair to him, which I agree. I agree that what she's doing is unfair to him, but I do not agree that breakup is the first solution that I would suggest, because then you're going to be a single parent. And you know what? As a single parent, your options to get out of poverty, to at some point be able to afford other things that you do with your life are very, very, very restricted. They're so much more limited when you're a single parent than when you're in a two-parent household. So I would not recommend breaking up. I would actually recommend first looking at this amount of bitterness and resentment that you have and trying to figure out how much of that resentment is down to your actual partner and how much of that is down to the circumstances and the situation that you find yourself in. Because honestly, if you're able to get some therapy, if you're able to look through the environment that you have around you to try and get a different perspective, to try and break down that feeling of bitterness and regret and, oh my God, I wish that things were different, then it could be that at the end of it, when you look at your partner, you see something completely different. And you actually learn to appreciate the situation that you're in. And the fact that you have a partner who's really present, who's really helpful, who really cares about you, who probably really, really loves you and is dedicated to you. She says that she thinks that their relationship is only continuing because they're dedicated to the child. But everything that she describes is behavior from him that I would say he's dedicated to his family, which is both her and the child. And then the other part of this that kind of grinds my gears, she says she doesn't want to even see other people. She just wants to be free to be herself. And this goes back to this idea. I have another video about this idea of like you losing yourself to motherhood that a lot of people talk about. And I honestly, like, it's one of the terminology that's used that's associated with motherhood that I truly deeply despise. Because I think it gives you the impression that having kids means that old you dies and then it's just gone. Like your previous life is just dead. That there's nothing there. Your life has changed so dramatically that there's nothing that you could be doing that connects previous you pre-kids and current you now post-kids. And this is obviously wrong. Motherhood is a transformation. You take everything that you were before and then you integrate a lot of extra responsibilities. Maybe in some ways, I'd say you actually integrate a much deeper sense of joy and fulfillment in many ways, just by virtue of nourishing a life and watching it grow. And then you become new you. And new you should be, if you're doing it right and you have the right circumstances and you have the right kind of mindset and approach to it, new you should be better in every way than old you should be. And than old you was. And maybe this isn't the case for a lot of people. Maybe this isn't what they experience. And I think that's a real, real shame. But this idea of I want to be free to myself, how much of that, like, what does that actually mean in practice? What does that really feel like? What does that look like? And what are the things that you want to be doing that are different to what you currently do? And how can you make those happen anyway? Because honestly, having kids does not restrict your life to such a huge extent that you're like, okay, now my whole life is out the window. There are always solutions. There are always ways that you can change your life if that's what you want to do. So that was the one statement here that I wanted to pick up on. Unfortunately, like, I think she already kind of sets it up when she says, I won the lottery, but I'm still regretful. So I won the lottery by being lucky enough to have a partner who really stepped up when I was pregnant and really committed to us as a family. But I'm still regretful because I feel like I lost something, and she's not even very sure what she lost, as far as I can tell. She's not very explicit about that. So dear OP and dear other people there, Yes, having kids changes the course of your life. Yes, I can understand having a sense of frustration when that isn't planned and it isn't what you hoped for and it isn't what you wanted. But your life is not over. You are only 24 years old. You still have, at least probably in the majority of cases, 60 years ahead of you. You can change everything that you're experiencing right now. And the question is, how do you want to change it and what can you do? What can you do so that you don't feel this way anymore? there is this sense of helplessness when people look at the circumstances that they find themselves in, where they go, yeah, you know what, I was just dealt a bad hand of cards and I can't do anything about that. You can do a lot about that. Yes, you are dealt a bad hand of cards, but how you respond to that situation is what ultimately decides what kind of parent and what kind of person you will be. Oh, and the next one. I hate being a mother. I love my daughter, who's 13, and want the best for her. I, 32, had her when I was 19. My daughter is the product of assault, and even though I considered an abortion, I chose not to since I didn't have the resources at the time. I lived in a small town in Mississippi, and there weren't many abortion clinics near. I think the closest was an hour away. I didn't have the money or a car to have an abortion, so I chose to keep my daughter, which I don't completely regret. We have so many memories together, but I just hate being a mum sometimes, like 50-50. There are days I'm so proud to have her as a daughter. She's a well-behaved kid. Her teacher sends me texts complimenting her behavior. She's responsible for the most part. Like, I can leave her at home by herself, and I trust she's not going to do something reckless. I'm a single mom, since of course her biological father is a predator who assaulted me. He stays in and out of jail and has charges of domestic violence and assault, sexual assault, which isn't even with me since I never reported my assault. He's also a registered sex offender, so I don't want him in her life. Sometimes I wish I would have just gotten the abortion. I hate I have to pay for everything, and I'm the only one making sacrifices. I hate that I have to compromise all the time for this kid. I can't eat what I want because I know she's a picky eater, and since I don't want food to go to waste that I can't afford to waste, I have to cook what she likes, which is the same old crappy food. I hate that I can't ever get myself out of debt. I'm paying for braces that she doesn't even take care of. She's broken her brackets over 10 times. Even the orthodontist threatened to take them off if she doesn't start taking care of them. She sneaks and eats food that she's not supposed to eat, like Takis at school. I don't know what that is. I hate I'm constantly missing out on making extra money to get out of debt because I have to take her to her tournaments on the weekends, or I can't work late evenings or nights since I don't feel comfortable with her being home alone too late. I hate paying for 2 phones and then she doesn't even take care of her phone. I hate that she can be so ungrateful. She wanted AirPods for Christmas and I got her the knockoff ones and she didn't want them, even though they look just like AirPods. I hate that Friday she was home all day because she didn't have school and did nothing but sat on the phone and watched TV all day, yet I worked my 9 to 5 and then Uber drove after to come home, and she didn't even think to clean up even though she has chores every week. I hate that I have to juggle multiple jobs that I probably wouldn't have to work if I was childless. I hate that I already have anxiety thinking about in a few years I have to get her a car and pay for college. I feel like it will never end and I refuse to have more children. I hate when people tell me I'm still young and I just have to meet the right person. No, I'm not starting over with raising children. Now, there's an update here that I'll go into in more depth in just a second. I want to start by saying that this is obviously really awful and I have a lot of compassion and a lot of sympathy for her in terms of the situation that she found herself in. I think it's so much harder when it's not even a mistake that you made, but it's down to something like assault and you had no choices and you had no options available to you. I think that really, I cannot imagine, I truly cannot imagine how difficult that it is. What I find still so sad about all of this is that, honestly, I still largely believe that a lot of this is maybe not down to her, but I think that there's a lot that she can do to influence it and to change it. So everything from the types of sacrifices that she's making for the kid when it comes to things like the food that she's buying because the child is the kid is a picky eater, the orthodontist, the braces that she's paying for that she in theory doesn't seem to be able to properly afford, but at the very least the kid is so destructive with them that she's spending too much on them anyway. The fact that she has to take her to tournaments and she can't work late, that she is an ungrateful kid because she wants things like AirPods. I think that a lot of these things, I mean, I don't know, maybe I overestimate it, but to a large extent, honestly, as a 13-year-old, I think is old enough that you can really sit down and have actually considered conversations with them about their expectations from you as a parent and about your expectations towards them as the child. And everything, like, I mean, some of the things that bug her in terms of her sneaking and eating food that she's not allowed to have, like, this is pretty normal child behavior. Even the freaking out because you don't have the AirPods, presumably because your peers all have AirPods and you want to be the same as them. Like, some element of that is normal. Also, the fact that she watched TV all day and didn't do her chores when she had the opportunity to do her chores, like this is all pretty normal 13-year-old behavior. It's pretty normal teenage behavior. But I really believe that a lot of the time kids will take whatever you give them. And I don't know very many kids in my experience who manage to be like responsible and independent and self-sustain, able to sustain themselves in some kind of way, to look after themselves in some kind of way without a lot of support from their parents and without being kind of forced to do it from an expectations perspective by their parents as well. So I find this a really, I just find this super sad. I find it especially tough that she doesn't seem to have she doesn't seem to have any kind of support system. I would really look into trying to get a support system. So trying to make friends with other moms in the neighborhood, or I don't know, who knows where the grandparents are in this situation. But if you have grandparents, trying to get grandparents to be involved. I think whatever you can do that you don't feel like all of the weight of managing everything is always on you, and then being a little bit more ruthless in terms of the things that you can afford and the things that you can't afford, should make the whole situation a lot better in terms of being stressed out and dealing with finances. A lot of this, I feel, is down to this feeling of just getting burnt out and being overwhelmed by all of the responsibilities that you have, especially the moment where she says that she's already concerned about the idea of having to buy her a car or get her through college. Like, these are not expectations, these are not requirements. As a parent, you don't have to do these things. And so it's one of those things where I would just be honest with myself about what I can afford and just try to be the best parent that I could, but then still be open to my child about things like, okay, you know what, these are things that I'm sorry, I just cannot afford. And so it really sucks. It's a really difficult situation. I find it especially tough that she was put into this situation with zero responsibility. So it's not that she did anything that kind of resulted in this. It just happened to her. And this is definitely one of those circumstances where you're just dealt a bad hand, and there's not much you can do with it. You just have to kind of live with the situation that you find yourself in. What I would always say to myself, if I found myself in a situation similar to that, is that if I were to wake up every single day and say, you know what, I hate my life, and I hate the fact that I have a kid, and I hate everything, I hate a lot of what she does, I hate the stress that I have to deal with, I hate having to deal with all of these financial problems, not being able to get myself out of debt. If I had that narrative in my head and I woke up every single morning and that is how I felt, and I did that for 18 years, 13 years, then I would hate my life, right? Not only would I hate my life, I would feel depressed, I would feel hopeless, I would be so dragged down and so beaten down by just the prospect of living, that I wouldn't be able to move on, and I wouldn't see any opportunities or see any possibilities for me to make my life any better in the long run. And I think that that's one of the things that are in some ways a little bit harmful about this type of thread, although I hope that other people suggest things that are actually helpful. But definitely this is one of those things where I think a lot of people assume that if you talk about mindset, then what you're doing is you are diminishing the problems that people are actually going through and the struggles that they have. But I would argue that sometimes your mindset is the only thing that keeps you going when you're really, really, really struggling. And so I would always try to change the story that I tell myself about my life and how I ended up here, and especially the story that I tell myself about the power and the ability that I have to change my circumstances if I need to change them. And especially with this kid, I would really try to change the scope of my relationship with her, so that I could sit down with her and talk to her about things like the orthodontist stuff. So I could talk to her about things like her being a picky eater. Like, being a picky eater is not okay in a lot of places. A lot of homes do not allow that. And so these are boundaries that I would set, and I would expect them to be followed. And then hopefully slowly over time, things can become a little bit less stressful. And if I wanted to focus on paying my debt off, then I would cut corners when it comes to things like taking her to tournaments and so on. And I would be honest with her about that. And I would be like, yeah, look, I know it sucks. I am not the parent that I wish that I could be, but these are the responsibilities that I have towards us as a family, so that both of us manage to have a better outlook in the future. And so that's part of what you have to do here. To scroll a little bit down, OP added some more information here. She said, thank you all for the encouraging words. I really didn't expect that since I never really voiced my frustrations about motherhood. A lot of people come off as judgmental. I probably met one person in real life who is also a single mother, divorced, who has also expressed her frustrations with motherhood. I do feel like I have to overcompensate since I'm a single mother. I don't want her to feel like she's missing out because it's just me. So although I shouldn't, I do feel the pressure of having to do more than I should. I know people said I don't have to get her a car. I want to, since I know it will make less work for me as far as transportation. We may come up with a deal, like a commenter suggested, that she save up a third for the car and I save up 2/3 for a nice little used car, so she would see the value of hard work and how it pays off. I like that idea. As far as college, I will start expressing when she gets into high school that she will have to work on getting good grades and stay involved in extracurricular activities and community service to see about academic and athletic scholarships. And so I hope that what OP got from the thread and from some of the suggestions from other people is that there are practical suggestions and practical things that you can do as well to try and improve at least your long-term prospects. I wanted to point out a couple of the comments that she got here. One person says, "Thanks for venting. I regret not having an abortion regularly. Motherhood has ruined my life, and single motherhood at that. I want everyone who will listen to never have children. I cannot wait for them to grow up and get out so I can have some freedom to be an actual human." And to this, I really feel that going out of your way to tell other people that having kids is the worst thing that could ever happen to them when you're a single parent is deeply unfair, and I would say extremely, extremely biased in a way that's super harmful. Of course, having kids as a single parent is much, much more difficult than having kids within a stable, secure family unit. And I think that this is what makes this is why all of the problems that we are experiencing now as a society in terms of the destruction of the family unit and the statistics on divorce and the number of single parent households that exist now, which is also going up over time. Like, this is a large part of all the problems with that. As you can see here, even the previous story we just read, the first suggestion was, well, maybe you should just break up with your boyfriend and move on. And that's exactly the problem that we kind of experience. I definitely, the argument, motherhood has ruined my life. I always want to say, you have ruined your life. It is not the act of becoming a mother that ruined your life. It is the choices that you made in response to that. And yeah, maybe in some ways, you know, again, you end up in situations that you can't change. And OP here is a perfect example of that. She ended up in a situation, she had no responsibility for it, and it just ended up this way. But you always have some amount of control over your life. And the key thing that you need to keep in mind as any person who experiences any type of hardship, and all of us will experience different kinds of hardship through our life, is how you respond to hardship is the thing that really determines the type of person that you are. So no, I don't think that suddenly being responsible for other people means that you're not an actual human anymore. And I don't think that you need to treat their presence in your life as though it stops you from being able to do anything else. We have had kids, societally speaking, for millennia. People have continued working and having kids and like living life in all the different ways that they have managed. And obviously we had different circumstances. People had communities. Whatever happens that results in you struggling and in your particular circumstances being so difficult, I have, like I said, full compassion for that, and I completely understand that. It's not that I am judging, I'm really not. But I find this rhetoric that people have around motherhood and becoming a parent in general just so harmful and so sad. You can see this one here says, "I hate it too. My son is 3 and I'm pretty sure I'm just going to leave him with his dad. I never liked small children and I'm not maternal. I don't know, maybe I'm a sociopath, but I'm not cut out to be a mum. He whines and cries all day and I feel nothing but annoyance. I mostly see him as a nuisance in my life and I have no desire to make my life revolve around him. Plus his dad has gotten off way easy by not raising him or really paying for anything. He's a FaceTime father." Little does he know that's all about to change. Being a mum is boring, and being a single mum is even more pointless. I always tell myself I'll come back around when he's older. Yes, I know it sounds shit, but I've raised him alone for 3 years now, and I need a break, like a long distancing from motherhood. I don't want to smell toddler poop and microwave chicken nuggets every day and clean up food off the floor and listen to screeching and screaming for another day. Mentally, motherhood has broken me. We were never supposed to do things this way. And that, again, zero judgment towards the actual person who's writing this, because I don't know what kind of headspace she was in, and I have no idea what her life experiences are, and I don't know how she ended up here. But I will always take from this, my very giant learning is that being a single parent as an experience really sucks, is really painful, is really hard. Yes, a lot of people manage it, and I can only imagine how difficult it must be for them to manage it. But ultimately, the amount of stress that it places on the mother and the amount of stress that it places on the kids is not good. It's not good at all. And I appreciate at least that the person who wrote this post says we were never supposed to do things this way. And I agree completely. I don't think that it was ever the way that we were made to be, that any individual person has to learn how to raise a child from the moment that they're born until they become an adult exclusively as one single individual person. I don't think that that's how it's meant to work. And I completely understand why that's difficult and why that's painful for a lot of people. And so my personal takeaway would be to try to avoid becoming a single parent. That's all we have time for today. We'll probably read a couple more of these at a later point, but if you like the video, feel free to like it down below or leave a comment if you disagree, especially with anything that I said, and subscribe for future content. I will see you in the next one.